5 bullets. .45 caliber, hollow points. That isn't an accident. That is an execution. But those bullets weren't meant for the 23-year-old Omega trembling in the emergency room. They were meant for the most feared woman in Chicago, the mother of Dante Russo, the city's Shadow King. When the smoke cleared on that rainy Tuesday in October, the hierarchy of the underworld didn't just shift. It shattered. Because the boy bleeding out on the pavement wasn't family. He wasn't a soldier. He was a ghost. No one had ever noticed him. Until he made the ultimate sacrifice. This is the true story of Soren Cole, the Omega who stepped in front of a death sentence. And the secret that left even the coldest hitmen in tears. Chicago. October 12, 2023. The wind off Lake Michigan was biting. The kind that rattles window panes and seeps into the bones of the city. Inside the penthouse suite of the Gregorian Hotel, however, the air was still. It smelled of expensive leather, cigar smoke, and the faint antiseptic scent of lilies. Underneath it all, barely perceptible, was the rich, dark undertone of aged whiskey and something else, something primal. Alpha. Soren Cole adjusted the collar of his uniform. It was stiff, scratching against his neck. He was invisible here. That was the job. Be present but absent. He wasn't a maid exactly, and he wasn't a nurse, though he had the training for the latter. He was a companion for Katerina Russo, a 70-year-old matriarch who was losing her battle with Parkinson's but had lost none of her venom. "You're shaking the spoon, boy," Katerina snapped, her voice thin but sharp as cracked glass. "Are you trying to starve me?" Soren didn't flinch. He steadied his hand, bringing the silver spoon of broth to the older woman's lips. "It's the wind, Signora." The building sways a little on the high floors. It was a lie. The building was solid steel and stone. Soren was shaking because Dante was in the room. Dante Russo stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to them. He was a man who seemed to absorb the light around him. Tall, broad-shouldered, poor into a charcoal suit that cost more than Soren would earn in a decade. He was on the phone, speaking in low, rapid Italian. Soren didn't speak the language, but he understood the tone. It was the tone of a man ordering an airstrike. The Alpha's scent permeated every corner of the penthouse. It was a thunderstorm in a bottle, ozone, gunmetal, and the sharp bite of expensive cologne layered over something darker. Something territorial. Even from across the room, Soren could feel it pressing against his senses, making his hindbrain stutter with a confusing mix of fear and something else. Something he refused to name. Dante hung up and turned around. His eyes were the color of cold brew coffee, dark, alert, and entirely devoid of warmth. He didn't look at Soren. He rarely did. To him, Soren was furniture. A utility. "Mother," Dante said, walking over to the bedside. "We are moving you to the estate tonight. The city isn't safe." Katerina pushed the spoon away, splattering broth on Soren's white apron. Soren immediately dabbed it with a napkin, his movements precise and practiced. "I'm not leaving my home because a few Bratva dogs are barking," Katerina hissed. "Your father built this city. I am trying to keep you alive in it," Dante replied, his voice flat. He finally glanced at Soren. It was a cursory check, like looking at a clock on the wall. "Pack her things. We leave at 1800 hours sharp." "Yes, Mr. Russo," Soren whispered. As Dante walked out, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind him, Soren felt the air return to the room. He took a shaky breath, the Alpha's oppressive scent finally beginning to fade. His hands were trembling again, but this time it wasn't from Parkinson's. He had been working for the Russo family for 6 months. He needed the money. His younger brother, Toby, was in a specialized facility for addiction recovery in Wisconsin, and the bills were astronomical. The agency had placed him here because he was discreet. No social media, no boyfriend, no criminal record. Blank slate. But Soren wasn't blind. He knew who Dante Russo was. The papers called him a businessman. The streets called him Il Macello the butcher. He ran the shipping yards, the unions, and the high-stakes poker rinks. He was a monster in a silk tie. Yet there are moments late at night when Katerina was asleep that Soren had seen Dante sitting by his mother's bed, simply holding her hand, his face buried in her palm. He looked exhausted then. Human. It was those moments that terrified Soren more than the guns he knew his bodyguards carried. It's easy to hate a monster. It's dangerous to understand a man. The afternoon passed in a blur of packing. The tension in the penthouse was palpable. Security detail increased. Large men with earpieces, men named Rocco and Sal, paced the hallways. They checked the elevators. They checked the vents. They're nervous, Katerina muttered as Soren folded her silk scarves. The old woman was sitting in her wheelchair, staring at the gray skyline. Dante is nervous. He thinks I don't see it. He loves you, Signora, Soren said softly. Katerina scoffed, but her eyes softened. Love is a weakness in our world, child. It's a target painted on your back. She looked at Soren, really looked at him for the first time in weeks. You have no one, do you? No husband. No children. No pack. Just my brother, Soren admitted quietly. Katerina nodded slowly. Attachments get you killed, boy. Remember that. At 5:45 p.m., the convoy was ready. 3 black SUVs idled in the underground garage. The plan was standard. Dante in the lead car, Katerina and Soren in the middle, precious cargo, and a heavy security detail in the rear. They took the private service elevator down. The garage was cold, smelling of gasoline and damp concrete. Dante was waiting by the middle SUV, holding the door open. He looked tense, his jaw tight. Get her in quickly, he commanded. Soren maneuvered the wheelchair, helping Katerina into the back seat. As he buckled the old woman in, Dante's hand brushed Soren's arm. It was accidental. Electric. Soren's breath caught. A spike of something, pine and clean linen, his omega scent, leaked from his glands before he could suppress it. Dante's nostrils flared almost imperceptibly. His eyes snapped to Soren's face. For a split second, something flickered in those dark depths. Recognition. Surprise? It was gone as quickly as it appeared. Sit on the other side, Dante ordered, his voice rougher than before. Keep her head down if I say down. I understand, Soren said, climbing in. The door slammed shut with the finality of a coffin lid. As the convoy rolled out of the garage and into the rainy Chicago evening, Soren watched the raindrops streak across the bulletproof glass. He had a bad feeling. A knot in his stomach that felt like swallowed lead. He looked at Katerina. The old woman was clutching a rosary, her knuckles white. It's okay, Soren lied, reaching out to cover Katerina's trembling hand with his own. We'll be at the estate in an hour. They turned onto Wacker Drive. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. Soren didn't know it then, but he would never make it to the estate. And the rosary in Katerina's hand would be the only thing that didn't end up covered in blood. The ambush didn't happen on the highway. That would have been too predictable, and Dante Russo didn't make mistakes with routes. It happened at a choke point, a construction zone on a narrow one-way street near the river, where the convoy was forced to slow to a crawl. It was 6:12 p.m. Soren was looking out the window at a homeless man pushing a cart when the world exploded. The lead SUV, the one Dante was in, hit a pressure plate mine concealed under a steel road plate. The explosion was deafening, a concussive wave that lifted the heavy armored vehicle 3 feet into the air before slamming it down on its side. Dante! Katerina screamed, a sound so raw it tore at Soren's heart. Stay down, Soren shouted, unbuckling his seat belt and throwing himself over the old woman's lap. Chaos erupted. The rear SUV was rammed by a garbage truck that swerved out of an alley, pinning the security team against the concrete barrier. Then came the gunfire. It was rhythmic, precise. Automatic rifles. The sound of bullets hammering against the bulletproof glass of their SUV was like hail on a tin roof. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Spider webs of white cracks appeared on the windows, but they held. "Driver, get us out of here," Soren yelled at the front. But the driver, a man named Enzo, was slumped over the wheel. A single high-caliber round had punched through the windshield's weak point, the seam near the frame. He was gone. They were sitting ducks. Soren looked up through the cracked window. He saw figures emerging from the shadows of the construction site. They wore tactical gear, faces obscured by balaclavas. They weren't moving like street thugs. They moved like a SWAT team. They were coming for the door. Katerina's door. Soren's mind went blank. Fear, usually a paralyzing cold, turned into a strange white-hot clarity. He looked at Katerina. The woman who had scolded him for shaking a spoon was now a sobbing mess, calling out for her son. Soren glanced at the overturned lead vehicle. Smoke was pouring from the hood. The driver's side door was kicked open. Dante crawled out. He was bleeding from a gash on his forehead, his suit torn, but he was moving. He had a handgun drawn. He fired 2 shots, dropping one of the attackers, but he was pinned down by suppressive fire from the scaffolding above. He couldn't get to them. He was 30 feet away, screaming something Soren couldn't hear over the roar of gunfire. His eyes locked on his mother's car. He looked helpless. For the first time, the King of Chicago looked utterly helpless. The handle of their SUV turned. The lock disengaged. The electronic locks had shorted out from the blast, or they had a master key. The door was ripped open. Cold air rushed in, smelling of cordite and rain. A man stood there. He was huge, blocking out the street lights. He raised a suppressed submachine gun, leveling it directly at Katerina's chest. There was no time to think. No time to calculate. Katerina froze, staring down the barrel. Soren didn't freeze. In that fraction of a second, Soren didn't think about his brother in rehab. He didn't think about his empty apartment or his unpaid bills. He saw the gun. He saw the old woman. He saw Dante 30 feet away, roaring in silent agony as he tried to run toward them through a hail of bullets. Soren lunged. He threw his body across the back seat, shielding Katerina completely, turning his back to the open door. Pop, 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 pop. It didn't feel like pain at first. It felt like being punched by a heavyweight boxer. 5 distinct impacts. One in the right shoulder. One in the lower back, near the spine. 2 in the ribs. One piercing the left lung. The force of the bullets slammed Soren against Katerina. The old woman screamed, but Soren couldn't hear her anymore. His ears were ringing with a high-pitched whine. He slid down, his body going oddly limp. He hit the floor mat of the SUV. The shooter paused, perhaps surprised that the target was covered, or perhaps out of ammunition. That pause was his last mistake. Dante Russo was there. He didn't run. He collided with the gunman like a freight train. There was a sickening crunch of bone as Dante slammed the assassin against the door frame. He didn't use his gun. He used a combat knife, driving it into the man's neck with a primal roar of rage. The gunman fell. Silence seemed to rush back into the street, heavy and suffocating. The remaining attackers were fleeing, sirens wailing in the distance. Dante ripped the rear door fully open. "Mama! Mama!" he shouted, his voice cracking. Katerina was covered in blood, but she was shaking her head, sobbing, pointing down. "Not me, Dante. Not me. It's the boy. It's Soren." Dante looked down. Soren was curled on the floorboards, his white uniform now a deep glistening crimson. His breath was coming in wet, bubbling gasps. Pink froth was forming on his lips. Dante froze. The man who had cut throats without blinking. The man who had ordered hits over dinner. He felt his stomach drop out of his body. He fell to his knees on the wet asphalt, reaching inside. "Soren," he said, his voice trembling. He grabbed the Omega, pulling his upper body out of the car, cradling him against his chest. His blood immediately soaked into Dante's ruined shirt. It was warm. Too warm. "Look at me," Dante commanded, but the authority was gone. It was a plea. Look at me, Soren. Soren's eyes fluttered open. They were hazy, unfocused. He looked up at the rain falling from the dark sky. Then his eyes found Dante's face. He tried to speak, but only a gurgle of blood came out. He lifted a hand, his fingers trembling violently, and brushed the spot on Dante's forehead where he was bleeding. "You're okay," he whispered. The words were barely audible. "She's okay. She's fine. You saved her. You saved her, Soren." Dante pressed his hand over the wound in the Omega's chest, trying to stem the flow. The blood pushed through his fingers, relentless and hot. "Stay with me. Do you hear me? That is an order. Stay with me." Soren smiled. It was a faint ghost of a smile. "No more shaking, Spoon," he breathed. And then his eyes rolled back. His hand dropped from Dante's face, hitting the wet pavement with a splash. "No." Dante roared. He scooped the Omega up in his arms, standing. He didn't wait for the ambulance. He didn't wait for his backup. "Get the car," he screamed at the surviving security guard, Rocco, who was stumbling toward them. "Get the other car now." He held Soren close, the Omega's blood mixing with the rain on his skin. He looked down at the pale, still face. He looked so small, so fragile. "Don't you die on me," Dante whispered into his hair. A tear leaked from his eye, the first tear Dante Russo had shed in 20 years. "I don't even know you. Don't you dare die before I know you." As the sirens closed in, the Shadow King of Chicago stood in the rain, holding the invisible Omega who had just taken 5 bullets for the woman who treated him like furniture. And in that moment, Dante Russo knew, if Soren died, he would burn the entire world down to find the men responsible. The ride to St. Jude's, a private off-the-books clinic in the suburbs, was a blur of motion and terror that felt agonizingly slow to Dante. The SUV tore through red lights. Rocco leaned on the horn, a siren they had illegally installed wailing like a banshee. In the back seat, Dante Russo was no longer the Shadow King. He was a tourniquet. He had ripped off his expensive silk tie and bound it tightly around Soren's upper thigh, where a ricochet had grazed an artery. But the chest wounds were a nightmare. Every time the car hit a bump, Soren made a small wet sound that sounded like a drowning kitten. It made Dante's blood run cold. "Stay with me," he growled. His hand pressed over the worst of the holes, just below the Omega's heart. The blood was hot, sticky, and endless. It coated his hands, his cuffs, his soul. "Rocco, if you don't get us there in 3 minutes, I will put a bullet in your head myself." "We're here, boss. We're here," Rocco screamed, drifting the heavy SUV into the ambulance bay of the clinic. The doors flew open before the car even stopped. Dr. Eris, a Greek surgeon who had patched up more Russo soldiers than he could count, was waiting with a gurney and a team of 4 nurses. They knew the protocol, no questions, no police. Just save the life. Dante didn't wait for them to lift him. He carried Soren out, placing him onto the stretcher himself. The Omega's head lolled back, his skin the color of ash. He looked dead. He looked so agonizingly dead. Gunshot wounds. 5 count. Dante barked, running alongside the gurney as they rushed him through the double doors. Chest, abdomen, shoulder. Possible spinal involvement. He's losing blood fast. Dr. Eris shone a pin light into Soren's eyes. Pupils are sluggish. Get him to trauma 1. Prep there. I need 4 units of O-negative stat. He looked at Dante, stopping him at the swinging doors of the surgical wing. "Dante, you stop here." "I'm coming in," Dante said, his voice a low rumble. He was covered in the Omega's blood. He looked like a demon rising from hell. "You are not," Eris said firmly, putting a hand on Dante's chest. "You are not sterile, and you are in shock. If you come in, you compromise the field." "Do you want him to die?" Dante froze. The question hung in the air, heavy and absolute. "Save him," Dante whispered, gripping the doctor's scrub top. If he dies, Eris, if he dies, I'll burn this building down with me inside it. Go wash up, Dante. The doors swung shut, cutting off the view of Soren's pale hand hanging off the side of the gurney. Dante stood there for a long time, staring at the brushed metal of the doors. The adrenaline began to crash, replaced by a shaking that started in his hands and took over his entire body. He looked down at himself. His charcoal suit was ruined. His white shirt was red. He turned and walked mechanically toward the waiting room. It was a sterile private lounge designed for high-end clientele. Leather chairs, espresso machine, muted TV. Katerina was there. His mother was sitting in a wheelchair, a blanket draped over her shoulders. A nurse was cleaning a cut on her cheek, but otherwise she was unharmed. Physically, mentally, the Iron Lady of Chicago was shattered. She was staring at her hands, which were clean now, but she kept rubbing them together as if trying to wash something off. When Dante walked in, she looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed and terrified. Is he? Surgery, Dante said. He walked over to the wet bar, poured a glass of whiskey, and downed it in one swallow. It tasted like water. He poured another. Dr. Eris is working on him. He jumped, Katerina whispered, almost to herself. He didn't hesitate, Dante. The door opened. I saw the gun. I froze. I have seen guns my whole life, and I froze. She looked at her son, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. He is a nobody. A boy from an agency. He makes minimum wage. Why did he do it? Dante stared at the amber liquid in his glass. I don't know. He was shaking the spoon earlier. Katerina sobbed, a sudden jagged laugh escaping her. I yelled at him because he was shaking the spoon. I told him he was clumsy. She covered her face with her hands. I treated him like a servant. And he died like a soldier. He isn't dead yet, Dante said sharply. He couldn't hear that word. Not yet. He sat down opposite his mother, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. He watched the clock on the wall. 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9:30 p.m. The silence in the room was suffocating. Rocco came in and out, whispering updates about security, about the lockdown of the city, but Dante waved him away. He didn't care about the city. He cared about the rhythm of the clock. At 11:15 p.m., the double doors opened. Dante was on his feet instantly. Dr. Eris walked in. He looked exhausted. His surgical cap was in his hand, and there were sweat stains on his scrubs. He walked over to Dante and Katerina. Well, Dante demanded. The single word cracked like a whip. Eris sighed, rubbing his temples. He's alive. Dante let out a breath he felt he had been holding for 5 hours. Katerina crossed herself, murmuring a prayer. But Eris continued, his face grim. It's bad, Dante. Very bad. We had to remove his spleen. He lost a kidney. One bullet collapsed his left lung, and another grazed the L4 vertebrae. He's lost a massive amount of blood. His heart stopped twice on the table. Dante flinched. Twice. We revived him, Eris said. He's in a medically induced coma to let his body heal. The next 48 hours are critical. Infection, organ failure, clotting. The list of risks is long. If he wakes up, he paused. If there is a chance he may never walk again. He will walk, Dante said, a dark refusal in his tone. He will walk if I have to build him legs of gold. We do what we can, Eris said. He's in ICU. You can see him, but only for a moment. Dante nodded. He turned to Rocco. Take my mother to the estate. Triple the guard. No one in or out. Put the compound on lockdown. Dante, come with us, Katerina pleaded. It's not safe here. I'm staying, Dante said. Go. Mother. He waited until they left. Then he walked down the hallway to the ICU. Room 4. The room was dim, lit only by the blinking lights of the monitors. The sound was rhythmic, the whoosh hiss of the ventilator, the steady beep 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 of the heart monitor. Dante stepped inside and closed the door. Soren looked tiny in the hospital bed. He was hooked up to a dozen tubes. His face was swollen, a tube down his throat breathing for him. His chest, wrapped in thick bandages, rose and fell mechanically. His skin was so translucent, Dante could see the blue veins beneath it. He didn't look like the boy who had blended into the background of his penthouse. He looked like a broken angel. Dante approached the bed slowly, as if the Omega were made of glass. He reached out and touched his hand. It was cold, limp. He pulled a chair up to the bedside and sat down. He, the man who terrified seasoned criminals, felt a lump form in his throat. "You foolish boy," he whispered to the silence. "Why? Why take a bullet for a name that isn't yours?" He looked at Soren's face, studying the curve of his jaw, the dark lashes against his pale cheek. He realized he didn't even know the color of his eyes. Brown? Hazel? He noticed his hands. They were rough, not the soft, manicured hands of the Omegas he usually... No. He stopped himself. He had never been with an Omega like that. Never let himself. He was an alpha. A monster. Omegas were to be protected, not touched. But Soren wasn't like the others. Soren had worked. His hands were working hands. Calloused fingertips. Short nails. A small burn scar on the thumb. "I don't know who you are, Soren Cole," Dante said, his voice low and dangerous, a promise made to the universe. "But you are under my protection now. And the men who did this to you," he gently squeezed the cold fingers, "they are going to wish they had died in that car." Dante didn't sleep. He sat there holding Soren's hand, watching the monitor, waiting for the sun to rise on a city that was about to bleed. Morning broke over Chicago, gray and dismal, matching the mood inside the Russo stronghold. But Dante wasn't at the stronghold. He was still at the clinic, shaving in the small bathroom of Soren's recovery room. He had had fresh clothes brought to him, a black tactical suit, more fitting for war than a boardroom. Soren hadn't moved. The machines kept breathing for him. At 8 a.m., Rocco entered the room. He looked nervous. "Boss, we got something." Dante wiped the remaining shaving cream from his jaw. He looked at his reflection, his eyes hard, golden flecks in the brown buried under layers of ice. "Talk." "We found the driver of the garbage truck. He bailed before the shooting started. Tried to hide in a motel in Gary, Indiana. Our boys picked him up an hour ago." "Is he at the warehouse?" "Yes, sir." "He's eager to talk, especially after Sal introduced him to the bolt cutters." Dante nodded. He walked out of the bathroom and went to Soren's bedside. He leaned down, close to the Omega's ear. "I have to go," he whispered. "I have to go handle business. But I will be back." "Fight, Soren. You fight." He left 2 armed guards at the door, men he trusted with his life, and exited the clinic. The warehouse was a soundproofed meatpacking facility in the meatpacking district, a relic of the old days. It smelled of bleach and iron. The driver, a low-level thug named Mickey, known as the Rat, was tied to a chair in the center of the room. He was already in bad shape. His face was swollen, and he was weeping. Dante walked in. He didn't yell. He didn't pick up a weapon. He simply pulled up a metal chair and sat directly in front of Mickey. He crossed his legs and adjusted his cuffs. "Mickey," Dante said softly. The man flinched as if struck. "Mr. Russo, I swear to God I didn't know. I didn't know it was your mother. They just told me to block the convoy. They said it was a heist." "Who are they?" Dante asked. "I don't know names. It was a text. An encrypted app. They paid in crypto." Dante sighed. He stood up and walked to a table where a variety of tools were laid out. He picked up a heavy wrench, weighing it in his hand. "Mickey, you blocked my mother's car. You trapped her. And a boy, an innocent boy, is currently breathing through a tube because of you." Dante turned, his face void of emotion. "You're going to tell me something better, then," It was an app. It was the Irishman's crew. Mickey screamed, straining against the ropes. I saw the guy who paid the drop. He had a shamrock tattoo on his neck. It was O'Malley's lieutenant, Finnegan. It was Finnegan. Dante paused. The O'Malley Syndicate. The Irish mob had been quiet for years, adhering to the truce Dante's father had brokered. If they broke it, this wasn't a skirmish. It was a declaration of war. Finnegan, Dante repeated. Are you sure? Yes. Yes. I swear on my mother's life. Dante looked at Rocco. Dispose of him. Wait. No. I told you. Mickey screamed as Dante turned his back. You told me what you knew, Dante said, walking toward the exit as the screams intensified behind him. But you touched my family. There is no currency that buys forgiveness for that. Dante sat in the back of his armored car, rubbing his temples. The O'Malleys. It made sense in a twisted way. They wanted the port access Dante controlled. But to hit his mother, that was desperate. Or personal. Boss, where to? The estate. Rocco asked from the front seat. No, Dante said. He pulled a file folder out of his briefcase. It was the personnel file for Soren Cole. He had ordered it the moment the shooting stopped. Go to 42B Cicero Avenue. Rocco looked in the rearview mirror, confused. Cicero? That's not a good neighborhood, boss. It's his address, Dante said. He needed to know who Soren was. He needed to understand the stranger who had saved his world. The building was a crumbling brick tenement on the south side. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and stale cigarettes. Graffiti covered the peeling wallpaper. Dante, flanked by 2 guards, walked up the 3 flights of stairs. He picked the lock of apartment 3B himself. The door creaked open. Dante expected a mess. He expected the chaotic life of a young Omega in the city. What he found was a monk's cell. The apartment was spotlessly clean but completely bare. There was a thin mattress on the floor in the corner, neatly made. A small table with 1 chair. A kitchenette with no food on the counters. It was freezing. Dante checked the radiator. It was turned off. In October. He walked into the room, his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking on the worn linoleum. He opened the refrigerator. A half-empty carton of milk. A jar of peanut butter. 3 apples. That was it. Jesus, Rocco muttered from the doorway. He was living like this. Dante felt a strange twisting in his gut. He paid his staff well. Soren's salary should have been enough for a decent apartment. Heat. Food. Where was the money going? He walked over to the small table. There was a neat stack of envelopes. He picked them up. They were bills, but not for Soren. Oak Creek Recovery Center. Patient, Tobias Cole. Monthly invoice, $8,500. Status, overdue. There was a second letter, typed in red ink. Final notice. Mr. Cole will be discharged on October 15th if the outstanding balance of $12,000 is not paid in full. October 15th. That was 3 days away. Dante put the letter down. His hand was trembling slightly. He looked around the room again, seeing the details now. The patched-up shoes by the door. Library books on the floor because he couldn't afford to buy them. The handwritten budget on a notepad where Soren had calculated his expenses down to the penny. Bus fare $2.50. Lunch skip. Toby's meds $40. Soren was starving himself. Freezing in the dark. Working 12-hour shifts, dealing with Dante's mother's abuse. All to keep his brother in rehab. And then, when the bullets flew, he didn't hide. He didn't think about his brother then. He thought about Katerina. Dante felt a wave of shame, so profound it nearly brought him to his knees. He had looked at Soren every day for 6 months and seen nothing. He had seen a uniform. He hadn't seen the warrior beneath it. He picked up a framed photo on the windowsill. It was the only personal item in the room. It showed a younger Soren smiling, his arm around a skinny, pale boy who looked like him. They were laughing. He looked happy, radiant. Dante touched the glass over Soren's face. "Rocco," Dante said, his voice thick. "Boss, call the bank. Wire $50,000 to Oak Creek Recovery Center. Tell them Tobias Cole's treatment is paid for the next year. And tell them if they ever send a threatening letter to this family again, I will buy the facility and fire everyone in it." "Done," Rocco said, typing on his phone. "Then call the real estate manager. Have the penthouse at the marina prepped, the one with a view of the lake." "For who, boss?" "For him," Dante said, putting the photo into his jacket pocket, right next to his heart. "He is never coming back to this rat hole. He is never going to be cold again. He is never going to be hungry again." He walked to the door, taking one last look at the empty, freezing room that held the secrets of the Omega who had saved him. "And Rocco?" "Yeah, boss. Find out where Finnegan is tonight. I'm not sending a hit squad." Dante stepped out into the hallway, his eyes burning with a cold, terrifying fire. "I'm going to kill him myself." The first thing Soren Cole felt was not pain, but thirst, a dry, scraping thirst that felt like he had swallowed a handful of desert sand. He tried to swallow, but something hard and plastic was in his throat. Panic, sharp and immediate, flared in his chest. He tried to sit up. His body didn't move. It screamed. A fire, hot and white and blinding, erupted in his torso, radiating from his chest to his hip. The monitor beside him exploded into a frantic, high-pitched alarm. "Easy, easy. Soren, do not move." The voice was deep, rough, and strangely familiar. A large, warm hand covered his, pressing it gently back onto the mattress. Soren blinked. His eyelids felt like lead weights. The harsh fluorescent lights of the ICU burned his retinas. Slowly, the blur resolved into a face. Dante Russo. But not the Dante Russo he knew. Not the immaculate, cold statue in the charcoal suit. This Dante looked like he had been to war. His jaw was covered in heavy stubble. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles that spoke of days without sleep. He was wearing a wrinkled black t-shirt. And most shocking of all, he was holding Soren's hand with a desperation that terrified him. While Soren tried to speak around the tube. "Water." "No, not yet. The tube has to come out first," Dante said. He looked over his shoulder. "Nurse, he's awake. Get Eris in here now." The next hour was a haze of doctors, bright lights, and the sickening sensation of extubation. When the tube finally slid out, Soren wretched, his abdominal muscles contracting in agony. Dante was there instantly, supporting his head, wiping his mouth with a cool cloth. "Breathe," he commanded softly. "Just breathe." When the room finally cleared, leaving only the rhythmic beep-beep of the heart monitor, Soren slumped back against the pillows. He felt hollowed out, broken. He turned his head slowly to look at Dante. He was sitting in a plastic chair pulled right up to the bed rails, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped tight. "Mrs. Russo," Soren whispered. His voice was a ruin, a rasp of sandpaper. Dante closed his eyes for a second, a muscle in his jaw jumping. "She's at the estate. She's safe. Not a scratch on her." Soren let out a breath, his eyes fluttering shut. "Good. That's good. Good." Dante's voice rose, cracking slightly. "You took 5 bullets, Soren. You lost your spleen, kidney. You died on that table twice. And your first question is about the woman who yelled at you for shaking a spoon." Soren opened his eyes. He saw the anger in Dante's face, but he realized with a jolt that it wasn't directed at him. It was fear, pure, unadulterated fear masked his rage. "It was my job," he whispered. "No," Dante growled, leaning in close, his dark eyes boring into Soren's. "Your job was to pour tea and read books. Your job was not to be a human shield." "I didn't think," Soren admitted. "I just saw the gun." "You saved her life," Dante said, his voice dropping to a reverence Soren had never heard before. "You saved my mother." You save the only thing in this world I care about. He paused, looking down at Soren's battered hand. Until now. Soren's heart skipped a beat. The monitor sped up in betrayal. Beep, beep, beep. My brother, he rasped, panic suddenly gripping him again. Toby. The facility. If I missed work, the payment, Tuesday was the deadline, they'll kick him out. He tried to push himself up, ignoring the agony. I have to call them. I have to. Soren, stop. Dante said firmly, putting his hands on Soren's shoulders. It's handled. Soren froze. What? Toby is fine. The facility is paid for. I have some savings, Soren stammered, confused. I can transfer. Paid in full, Soren, Dante cut him off. For the next 5 years. Including his therapy, his housing, and his college tuition when he gets out. Soren stared at him, his mouth slightly open. 5 years, that's thousands of dollars. I can't pay you back. I make $18 an hour. Dante let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head. You think I want your money? You bought that with your blood, Soren. You bought his future with your life. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Soren's phone. The screen was cracked. I went to your apartment, he said quietly. Soren felt a cold flush of shame. Dante had seen it. The emptiness. The poverty Soren tried so hard to hide. The radiator, that didn't work. The peanut butter jar. I'm sorry it's a mess, he whispered, tears pricking his eyes. I didn't have time to tidy up. Don't apologize, Dante said fiercely. Never apologize to me. I saw the letters. I saw what you were doing. You were starving yourself for him. He took Soren's hand again, squeezing it gently. That life is over. Do you hear me? You are never going back to that apartment. You are never going to be cold again. I don't understand, Soren said, a tear sliding down his cheek. Why are you here? You're Dante Russo. I'm just the help. Dante stood up. He towered over the bed, blocking out the harsh lights, casting a shadow that felt strangely protective. You are not the help, he said. You are the boy who walked through fire for my family when my own men ran. You are a Russo now, Soren. And Russos take care of their own. Before Soren could respond, the door opened. A nurse wheeled Katerina in. The old woman looked smaller than Soren remembered. Frail. When she saw Soren awake, she let out a sob that sounded like a child's cry. She tried to stand up from her wheelchair, her legs shaking. Mama, sit down, Dante warned. Hush, Dante, Katerina snapped, though her voice lacked its usual venom. She wheeled herself to the bedside. She reached out with trembling hands and cupped Soren's face. I'm a wicked old woman, Katerina wept, tears streaming into the deep lines of her face. I treated you like a ghost, and you gave me a life. Signora, please, Soren whispered, overwhelmed. No more Signora, Katerina said, kissing Soren's forehead. You call me Katerina. You are my son now. And if this idiot son of mine doesn't treat you like a king, I will shoot him myself. Dante watched them, the two people who had nearly died in the rain. He felt a tightening in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. He had spent his life building walls, amassing power, turning his heart into a vault. And one boy with zero power and a heart too big for his chest had shattered it all in 5 seconds. He walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, Finnegan was hiding. Somewhere out there, the men who put those holes in Soren were breathing. Dante's expression hardened into a mask of death. Enjoy your breath, he thought, because I'm coming to take it. Recovery was not a montage. It was a slow, grueling hell. 2 weeks later, Soren was discharged from the clinic. He was not taken to his apartment on Cicero Avenue. He was taken to the Russo estate, a sprawling fortress in Lake Forest, surrounded by 12-foot iron gates and patrolled by men with assault rifles. He was given the East Wing suite, a room larger than his entire apartment building. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the manicured gardens, a fireplace that was always lit, and a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. But Soren couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the pop, pop, pop of the gunfire. He felt the impact. He smelled the blood. He woke up screaming 3 nights in a row. On the 4th night, the door to his suite opened. Dante was there. He was wearing pajama bottoms and a t-shirt, his feet bare. He held a glass of warm milk and a bottle of pills. "Pain?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. "Memories," Soren whispered, pulling the silk sheets up to his chin. He was sweating, shivering. Dante set the glass down and sat on the edge of the bed. He didn't try to hug Soren. He knew the Omega was fragile. He simply sat there, a solid, immovable presence in the dark. "Tell me," he said. "I see his face," Soren said, staring at the shadows. "The gunman." He looked bored, like he was taking out the trash. "He is dead," Dante said flatly. "I killed him. He can't hurt you. His friends can." Dante turned to him. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face. "No, they can't. Because I am hunting them down one by one." It was true. While Soren healed, Chicago was burning. The newspapers called it a gangland reshuffling. Police called it a bloodbath. Dante Russo was systematically dismantling the Irish mob. Warehouses belonging to the O'Malleys mysteriously caught fire. Shipments of drugs were intercepted and dumped into the lake. Lieutenants were found beaten in alleyways with one-way tickets to Ireland stapled to their jackets. Dante was at war. But every night at 7 p.m., he was at the estate for dinner. He would sit at the long mahogany table with Katerina on one side and Soren on the other. Soren, still weak, would pick at his food. Dante would watch him, his plate untouched, until he saw Soren eat. "Eat the protein," he would say gently. "Dr. Eris said you need iron." "I'm not hungry." "Dante," Katerina would chime in. "For me." And Soren would eat. The intimacy between them grew in the quiet moments. It wasn't a romance of flowers and dates. It was a romance of survival. One evening, 3 weeks after the shooting, Soren was trying to walk down the hallway. His physical therapist had left for the day. He was using a cane, his steps slow and agonizing, his sides stitched with pain where the spleen used to be. He stumbled. He didn't hit the floor. Dante caught him. He had been walking behind him, shadowing his steps like a guardian angel. He scooped Soren up into his arms effortlessly. "I can walk," Soren protested breathless, his face inches from Dante's neck. He smelled of sandalwood and expensive scotch, and underneath it all, that thunderstorm alpha scent that made Soren's Omega instincts go haywire. "You're trembling," Dante noted. He carried Soren not to his room but to the library. He sat on the large leather sofa, settling the Omega onto his lap. "Dante, this is quiet," he murmured. He began to massage Soren's calf, where the muscle had cramped. His hands were large, strong, but incredibly gentle. "Why are you doing this?" Soren asked, his voice small. "You have an army of servants. You have nurses." Dante didn't look up from his leg. "Because they didn't almost die for me. I'm just a waitress, a companion." "This doesn't make sense." Dante stopped. He looked at Soren, his eyes dark and intense. "You think you're just a companion, Soren? The whole city is talking about you. They call you the Iron Angel. My men who kill for a living, they toast your name in the barracks. You are not just anything. You are the only person in this house with a pure soul." He leaned in, his forehead resting against Soren's. "And I am terrified," he whispered. "I am terrified that I am going to ruin you. I am a bad man, Soren. I do bad things." "I know," Soren whispered, his hand instinctively touching the scar on Dante's cheek. "But you're good to me." Dante kissed him then. It wasn't a hungry, demanding kiss. It was desperate. It was a kiss of gratitude, of apology, of a man drowning who had found a raft. Soren kissed him back, tasting the scotch and the sorrow on his lips. His body responded instinctively, a wave of warmth spreading through him. His scent glands flared, releasing a pulse of pine and clean linen, omega, open, willing. Dante's alpha instincts roared to life. He pulled back, panting, his eyes dark with something primal. Soren, I can't. Not like this. You're still healing. I don't care, Soren breathed, his voice trembling. I want this. I want you. But Dante shook his head, pressing his forehead against Soren's. When you're better. When you're whole. I want you to choose this with a clear head. Not because you're scared or grateful or he swallowed hard. Not because your body is telling you what to do. Soren's eyes filled with tears. What if I'm never whole? What if I can't walk? Then I'll carry you, Dante said simply. Everywhere. Every day. For the rest of your life. The moment was shattered by the ring of his phone. Dante pulled back, breathless. He looked at the caller ID. His face hardened instantly. The lover vanished. The butcher returned. Rocco. Speed. He listened for 10 seconds. His eyes went cold. Are you sure? He listened again. Bring the car around. We move in 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at Soren. The softness was gone, replaced by a terrifying resolve. What is it? Soren asked, clutching his shirt. Finnegan, Dante said, standing up and adjusting his jacket. We found him. He's trying to leave the country tonight on a private charter out of Midway. Dante, don't, Soren pleaded. Let the police handle it. The police will give him a lawyer, Dante said, walking to the hidden gun safe behind a painting of the Roman Colosseum. He punched in the code. The door hissed open, revealing an arsenal. He selected a black pistol, checking the chamber with a metallic clack. I'm going to give him a grave. He turned to Soren. Stay in this room. Rocco has the perimeter. Do not open the door for anyone but me. Dante. He walked out. The door clicked shut. The lock engaged. Soren sat alone in the library, the taste of Dante's kiss still on his lips, listening to the sound of engines roaring to life in the driveway. The War of Roses was over. The slaughter was about to begin. The grandfather clock in the library chimed midnight. The sound echoed through the strangely silent Russo estate. Soren paced the hardwood floor, his cane clicking rhythmically. His side throbbed where the spleen used to be, a phantom pain that flared whenever danger was near. Dante had taken the Alpha team to Midway Airport an hour ago. Intelligence suggested Finnegan, the Irish mob boss, was fleeing the country. The house was left with a skeleton crew, and Soren had been ordered to lock himself in. Click. The sound came from the service entrance. Soft, almost imperceptible. The alarm didn't chime. Soren froze. Only family had the bypass codes. He moved to the heavy oak desk, his heart hammering against his ribs. He remembered the hidden gun safe behind the painting. Dante had left it unlocked in his haste. His hands shook as he pulled out the heavy snub-nosed revolver. He had never fired a gun, but he gripped it with both hands, aiming at the library door. The handle turned. The lock, engaged only moments ago, was picked in seconds. The door swung open. It wasn't a hitman in a mask. It was Carlo Russo, Dante's cousin. The man who managed the family's legitimate finances. The man who had brought Soren tea just yesterday. Carlo, Soren whispered, the betrayal hitting him harder than a bullet. Carlo smiled, closing the door behind him. He held a silenced pistol loosely at his side. Hello, Soren. You really should be in bed. Recovery takes rest. You bypassed the alarm, Soren said, his voice trembling. Why? Because the airport is a decoy, Carlo said, stepping closer. Finnegan isn't at Midway. I sent Dante there to chase a ghost, while I clean up the loose ends here. You see, the Irish didn't want a war. I did. I leaked the route. Dante dies, I take the throne. Simple. He raised his gun. Dante is a relic. He rules with honor. I will rule with profit. He'll kill you, Soren warned, backing against the desk. He has to catch me first. Carlo laughed. Say goodbye, companion. Soren didn't hesitate. He squeezed the trigger. Bang! The recoil nearly broke his wrist. The shot went wide, shattering a vase on the mantel. Carlo flinched, then sneered, leveling his weapon at Soren's chest. But before he could fire, the heavy velvet curtains behind him exploded inward. Glass shattered as a dark figure swung through the terrace window, colliding with Carlo like a freight train. Done. He hadn't gone to the airport. Carlo. Dante roared as he pinned his cousin to the floor, knocking the gun away. Annie, we're blood. You are not blood, Dante snarled, his hands wrapping around his cousin's throat. You are a cancer. Soren watched, paralyzed, as the King of Chicago extinguished the threat. It was over in seconds. The silence that followed was heavier than the violence. Dante stood up, straightening his suit. He looked at the body, then at Soren. He saw the gun in the Omega's hand and the terror in his eyes. He walked over, gently prying the weapon from his fingers. I thought you were at the airport, Soren sobbed, collapsing into him. I knew, Dante whispered into his hair, holding him so tight Soren could feel his heart racing. I knew it was him. The airport was a trap, for him, not me. I was waiting on the terrace. I just needed him to show his hand. He kissed Soren's forehead, his voice breaking. I would never leave you unprotected. Never. 1 year later. The wind off Lake Michigan was biting, but inside the new penthouse overlooking Navy Pier, the air was warm. Soren stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror. The angry red scars on his torso had faded to silvery lines. He traced them absently. Stop staring at them, a deep voice rumbled. Dante walked up behind him, wrapping his arms around his waist. He kissed the scar on Soren's shoulder. They are proof that you are stronger than me. I'm not, Soren smiled, leaning back against him. You are, Dante insisted. You turned a butcher into, well, a slightly less murderous butcher. Soren laughed. It was a sound that made Dante's heart ache. Life had changed. The war was over. The Russo Empire now ran with a quiet, lethal efficiency, but the chaos was gone. Toby was a sophomore at Northwestern, studying engineering on a scholarship Dante had set up. Katerina was living in the guest wing, currently knitting aggressive amounts of baby clothes for a great-grandchild she insisted was inevitable, never mind that they were both men. Are you ready? Dante asked. For what? He didn't get down on one knee. That wasn't his style. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was a vintage ruby, dark as blood, surrounded by black diamonds. Marry me, Dante said, his eyes vulnerable for the first time in his life. Not for protection. Not for the family. Marry me because I cannot breathe when you're not in the room. Soren looked at the ring, then at the man who had pulled him from the wreckage of his poverty and given him a kingdom. Yes, he whispered, turning to kiss him. Always yes. The boy who was invisible had become the king, and the king who had no heart had found it in the trajectory of a bullet. 5 bullets. That's what it took to shatter the hierarchy of the Chicago underworld. Soren Cole didn't just save a life that day. He saved a soul. His story reminds us that true loyalty isn't bought. It's bled for. It proves that even in a world built on darkness, love can still be the most dangerous weapon of all. Extra story? The first time Dante Russo truly understood what it meant to be an alpha, he was 32 years old, covered in someone else's blood, and kneeling on the floor of a private clinic while a doctor told him the boy he loved might never walk again. He had spent his entire life believing that his second gender was a weapon. A tool. The thing that made men flinch when he walked into a room. The thing that made his voice carry weight, his presence command obedience. He had used his alpha nature the way other men used fists or guns, to dominate, to intimidate, to take what he wanted. But he had never understood it. Not really. Not until Soren. It happened 6 months after the shooting. 6 months of physical therapy, of slow, agonizing progress, of watching Soren relearn how to stand, how to walk, how to breathe without pain. 6 months of Dante sitting in the corner of the rehabilitation room, pretending to read reports while actually cataloging every twitch of Soren's muscles, every bead of sweat on his forehead, every small, stubborn smile when he managed to take 3 more steps than the day before. 6 months of fighting the urge to grab Soren by the shoulders and tell him to stop pushing so hard, to rest, to let Dante carry him for once. But Soren never stopped pushing, and Dante never stopped watching. The night it finally happened, the Chicago sky was clear for the first time in weeks. Stars actually visible through the haze of city lights. Dante had found Soren on the terrace of the penthouse, wrapped in a blanket, staring up at the sky. His scars were hidden under a soft gray sweater. His cane was propped against the railing. "You're supposed to be inside," Dante said, stepping out into the cold. "The doctor said." "I know what the doctor said." Soren's voice was soft, not sharp. A small smile tugged at his lips. "He said fresh air is good for me. Circulation. Or something." "I wasn't really listening." Dante snorted. He walked up behind Soren, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from the smaller Omega's body. Close enough to catch the faint scent of pine and clean linen that always made his alpha instinct sit up and pay attention. "Liar," Dante murmured. "You never listen to doctors. You listen to no one. I listen to you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Dante's hands found Soren's shoulders, gripping them gently through the blanket. "That's because you're an idiot." Soren laughed, a real laugh, the kind that made his whole body shake. It was the most beautiful sound Dante had ever heard. "And you're a tyrant." "We match." Dante turned Soren around to face him. The Omega's cheeks were flushed from the cold, his brown eyes bright. His scent was stronger now, a sweet undertone of something that made Dante's throat go dry. He had been noticing it more and more over the past few weeks. The way Soren's scent changed when Dante walked into a room. The way it deepened when Dante touched him. The way it spiked with something almost like hunger when they were alone. "Soren." Dante's voice came out rougher than intended. "You know I can smell you, right?" Soren's flush deepened. His eyes darted away. I can't control it." "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize." Dante tilted Soren's chin up with one finger, forcing eye contact. "Tell me what you're feeling." "Fear," Soren admitted. "Excitement." "Something else." "I don't have a word for it." "Try." Soren bit his lip. His scent spiked again, sharper this time, layered with something that made Dante's alpha instincts roar to life. "Need." The Omega was projecting need. "I want you to touch me," Soren whispered. "Not just like this. I want—" He broke off, trembling. "I want you to claim me." The words hit Dante like a bullet. 5 bullets. He had survived 5 bullets. But this was different. This was Soren, his Soren, asking for something Dante had never allowed himself to even imagine. "If I do that," Dante said slowly, fighting to keep his voice steady, "there's no going back." "I'm not." He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "I've never done this before. Not like this. Not with someone I love." Soren supplied, his eyes soft. The word hung between them. Dante had never said it. He had shown it in 1,000 small ways. The penthouse, the doctors, the way he slept in the armchair by Soren's hospital bed for weeks. But he had never said it. Saying it made it real. Made him vulnerable. "I'm a bad man," Dante said instead. "I've killed people. I'll probably kill more. I don't deserve." "Stop." Soren pressed a finger to Dante's lips. "If I hear one more word about what you deserve, I'm going to push you off this terrace." Dante laughed despite himself. "You and what arms?" "I'll use my cane." "Don't test me." Dante pulled Soren against his chest, burying his face in the Omega's hair. The scent of pine was overwhelming now, sweet and needy. His inner alpha was howling for him to bite, to claim, to make this boy his in a way that could never be undone. "I love you," Dante whispered into Soren's ear. "There. I said it." "Happy." Soren pulled back, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Ecstatic. So, you want this? Really want this? Not because you're grateful. Not because I paid for your brother's treatment. You want me. Soren grabbed Dante's face with both hands, forcing the alpha to meet his gaze. I want you. I want the monster and the man. I want the butcher and the son who holds his mother's hand. I want all of it, Dante. I've wanted it since the moment I woke up and saw you crying over my stupid, broken body. I didn't cry. You cried. A lot. Don't lie to me. 1 tear. It was 1 tear. 5 bullets, 4 tears, who's counting? Soren kissed him then, and Dante forgot everything. Forgot the war, the blood, the bodies buried in unmarked graves. There was only Soren's mouth, hot and demanding, and the way his body pressed against Dante's, soft and solid and alive. Dante lifted Soren effortlessly, ignoring the Omega's startled yelp, and carried him inside. The penthouse was empty except for them. Dante had made sure of that. No security, no staff, no interruptions. Just him and Soren and the inevitable pull between them. He laid Soren down on the enormous bed in the master suite, stepping back to look at him. The Omega's skin was flushed, his pupils blown wide. His scent was thick in the air, a siren call that made Dante's hands tremble with the effort of restraint. Last chance to change your mind, Dante said, his voice rough. Once we start, I don't think I can stop. I don't want you to stop. Soren reached for him. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Dante shed his clothes with mechanical efficiency, unwilling to waste a single second. We climbed onto the bed. Soren reached for him again, pulling him into a bruising kiss. Their bodies pressed together, hot and desperate, and Dante could feel the Omega's hardness against his thigh, could smell the slick beginning to gather in heat between Soren's legs. Alpha, Soren breathed, and the words sent a shock of pure electricity through Dante's spine. I've got you, Dante growled. I've got you, Soren. You're mine now. He pushed inside slowly, giving Soren time to adjust, but the Omega just wrapped his legs around Dante's waist and pulled him deeper, demanding more. It was overwhelming, the heat, the tightness, the way Soren's sin enveloped him like a promise. Dante moved with instinct, with need, with all the desperate, possessive love he had never been able to show anyone else. When Soren came, he screamed Dante's name, his body arching off the bed, and Dante followed a moment later, burying himself as deep as he could go, claiming Soren's body for the first time. But that wasn't the real mark. Not yet. He shifted, pulling Soren close, lips brushing the curve of the Omega's neck where his scent glands pulsed hot beneath the skin. Soren tilted his head, baring his throat. The ultimate submission. The ultimate surrender. Do it, Soren whispered. Please. I want to be yours. Dante bit down. Soren gasped, then cried out, his fingers tangling in Dante's hair as the Alpha's teeth broke the skin. Hot blood flooded Dante's mouth, and with it came Soren's taste, pine and clarity, and a sweetness that was purely, uniquely him. The bond snapped into place like a lock clicking shut. Dante could feel Soren's pulse under his tongue, the thrum of the Omega's heartbeat in perfect sync with his own. He could feel Soren's emotions, ecstasy, relief, love, flooding the newly formed bond. When Dante pulled back, Soren was crying. Real tears streaming down his cheeks, but he was smiling. I love you, Dante said again, and this time the words were heavier. This time they were bound in blood and instinct, and the permanent link that now existed between them. Soren pressed his hand to Dante's cheek. I know, Alpha. I've always known. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Soren's head resting on Dante's chest. The mark on his neck was already beginning to heal, a small angry red bruise that would fade to silver in time. Dante ran his finger over it, fascinated. Sore, he asked. A little. Soren smiled up at him. Worth it. You know what this means, right? Dante propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at the Omega. You're mine. Officially. No other Alpha can touch you. No other alpha can even get close without my instincts going berserk. You're also mine. Soren poked him in the chest. So if any omegas try to get close to you, I wouldn't. I couldn't. Dante pressed a kiss to Soren's forehead. You're it for me. You know that. I know. Soren snuggled closer. But I like hearing it. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the bond between them humming with warmth and satisfaction. In the morning, Katerina would bang on the door and demand to know why her son hadn't come for breakfast, and Soren would blush while Dante bellowed at his mother to go away. Security would triple. Business would go on as usual. But tonight, for this one perfect moment, there was nothing but them. Dante woke in the middle of the night to the sound of Soren whimpering in his sleep. Instantly alert, he gathered the Omega closer, murmuring soothing nonsense. Shoo, I'm here. You're safe. Soren's eyes fluttered open. Nightmare, he whispered. The gun? I know. Dante tightened his hold. I've got you. It's over. You're safe. Soren burrowed into Dante's chest. Your scent helps, he admitted quietly. It's like thunder in a bottle. It drowns out the memories. Dante laughed softly. Thunder in a bottle? That's what you smell like to me. Thunder. Lightning. Rain. Soren tilted his head up to meet Dante's eyes. And something sweet underneath. Not many people notice it. But I do. Dante's heart clenched. Of all the things he had ever been called, monster, butcher, shadow king, being described as sweet by a scrap of an omega with a crooked smile was somehow the most profound thing he had ever heard. Sleep, he said gruffly, his voice thicker than usual. I'll be here. Soren obeyed, sinking back into sleep with a small, contented sigh. Dante stayed awake a while longer, watching him breathe. He thought about the man he used to be. The one who built walls and kept everyone out. The one who saw omegas as weak and emotions as liabilities. He had been so wrong. Love wasn't a weakness, it was his greatest strength. It gave him something to protect. Something to live for. Something that made the blood on his hands meaningful. And Soren had done all of that. Not with bullets or blades or intimidation. With soft hands and a stubborn heart and the willingness to stand in front of death for someone who hadn't even seen him. Dante kissed the mark on Soren's neck one more time. The scent of pine and lightning filled his senses, and for the first time in his life, the Shadow King of Chicago fell asleep with no walls around his heart. In the morning, Soren woke to the smell of coffee and the weight of Dante's arms still wrapped possessively around him. He smiled, stretching like a cat, and heard a low growl from behind him. Don't move, Dante mumbled. 5 more minutes. You're a menace, Soren said, but he settled back against the Alpha's chest. Your menace. Soren turned in his arms, facing Dante. The Alpha's eyes were still half-lidded, his hair a mess, his face soft with sleep. He looked nothing like the terrifying figure who made criminals tremble. Thank you, Soren whispered. For what? For seeing me. For not looking away. Dante opened his eyes fully at that. The golden flecks in his irises caught the morning light. You stood in front of 5 bullets for my mother, he said slowly. I'd have to be blind not to see you. Most people were. Most people are fools. Dante cupped Soren's face in his hands, thumbs stroking his cheekbones. I'm not most people. Soren laughed. No, you're really not. They lay there in the quiet, listening to the distant sounds of the city waking up. Soren could feel the bond between them, warm and constant, a thread of connection that was never going to break. He had never felt so complete. So safe. Dante, he murmured. I love you too. Dante's eyes softened, and for a moment, the terrifying Alpha was gone, replaced by just a man who had been alone for so long he had forgotten what it felt like to be loved. I know, he said. I can feel it through the bond. He paused, searching for words. It's the best thing I've ever felt. Soren kissed him. It was slow and sweet and tasted like morning. They had all the time in the world. And the Shadow King, for the first time in his life, was willing to let the sun in. Then,